Welcome to Cory's Dark Corner, ladies and gentlemen. Happy belated Merry Christmas. It's Merry Christmas, bitch, not Happy Holidays. That's right. Forgot what Tom said. Merry Christmas, everybody. Hope you had a great one. I hope you got lots of fun gifts. And if you didn't, I hope you at least didn't die, because that's always a bonus. Joining us today for this awesome discussion is our wonderful friend, Shaun. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Thanks for that awesome introduction you put together there. That was great.
Yes, and thank you for that lovely "The Matrix Still Has You" thing. That was fantastic.
Oh no, thanks. That is going to be the intro to my new sort of bite-sized videos that I'm hoping to have out on a regular basis come New Year. So maybe not weekly, but maybe every 2 weeks, because I'm still dealing with things in my personal life at the moment that is kind of taking priority. But I just want to say Merry Christmas to everyone. I want to say hello to the chat. It's good to see Ryan. Yeah, Christine, great to see you guys. I'm looking forward to having a very in-depth conversation today about the simulation theory and how
Yes,
it ties into
indeed.
society.
Yep, as you guys could have read in the beginning, and as he just said, we are talking about the simulation hypothesis. I know theory is a standard word to be used here, but since it's currently unproven, it is still technically a hypothesis. I'm a stickler for technicalities. So, um, but this should, if you guys watched Dark Philosophy from last year, we had a brief touch, or not last year, earlier this year, I should say. We touched on this topic very briefly when we were on with Elagabalus. It did not go as deeply as I wanted, and we brushed it off rather quickly and in somewhat of a callous way. Um, Given the fact that I am incredibly ignorant on the simulation hypothesis, I know some things, but not a lot. My friend here is going to give us a slight history lesson on it and everything. But of course, I do want to say hi to everybody in the chat. Yes, hello, Ryan. Highlighted you early. Hello, Christian Delorme. He says, "Do you really want dark in your corner?" Sometimes you need a little darkness so you can see the light a little better. And there's no better title for what you do in the dark corners. There's no better place to do shady things than a dark corner. But anyway, so Shaun, the simulation hypothesis, is this a recent development?
Absolutely not. And there's always debates when it comes to the differences between hypotheses and theory.
Mm-hmm.
And I've kind of uh, not reinterpreted the definition, but theory, for me, there's more evidence to a theory, and hypothesis is more of an idea. And then to bring it into theory, you need evidence. And that evidence can be circumstantial. That doesn't necessarily mean that theory is proven correct. It's a theory. And through investigation, you either prove it or disprove it. Um, and The simulation hypothesis, or theory, if you will, dates back to ancient times. You have you have a lot of ancient Greek philosophy tied into it, where you have Plato's allegory of the cave, which they were doing their best to compare it. They did not have, like we have today, computer simulations in
Right.
that sense. So they were comparing it to books, structures, as in an artificial structure, an
Right.
artificial writing. And then you got, like I said, Plato's allegory of the cave, where, although not digital, because there's two different aspects to the simulation theory. A lot of people just jump on the digital version, which was
Mm-hmm.
popularized by the Matrix, but even that goes far back to like the 50s to 60s. You had Simulacra and Simulations, which is a French book that delves into a lot of that aspect in the 80s. And then, like I said, the Matrix popularized it. And whenever you end up talking about simulation theory, everybody just jumps straight to the Matrix. Like that's how,
Right.
and you kind of get ridiculed. But it's far more complex. It is far more grandiose than that. There's definitely more to it. So you have ancient religions, like a lot of ancient Indian cultures, that
Mm-hmm.
have the philosophy of what's called Maya, not to be confused with the Mayans, because you even have some of the Mayan cultures that talked about, that we were in the word will be a simulation, that there's a creator, and it created our reality, if you will, when there's a grander reality outside of that, which is kind of what the definition of a matrix is. I'm overly simplifying it here. It's a system within a system.
Right.
There's, there's not only digital examples of that, but, very physical, if you will, real, quote unquote, examples of that too. And, of course, a lot of information that we had on this was lost during the Dark Ages, during the purging of
Thought
like
and
the
scientific
library.
reason.
Yeah, because the ancient Greek, especially with the philosophers, and they did have what, I would confidently call scientists back then,
Hmm.
in the proper definition, as
Their
opposed
versions
to what
thereof.
we have
Yeah.
now.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's very different because they were operating off mathematics, but again, they didn't have digital computers and things like that, so
Right.
that was more heavily based on scripture and writings and things of that nature.
Right.
Um, and we got to the Knights Templar. So just like as the dawning of the Dark Ages, and I will get into a little bit of what the Dark Ages actually means, because a lot of people think the Dark Ages is dark, depressing, suffering. That's what they assign dark to, and it kind of ties into Cory's dark corner. It's actually refers to a lack of information. It's almost like humanity's history almost went dark there for a good few hundred years.
Right.
And that's where dark is. You go into the darkness, as you said, to shine a light on. That's where discovery is. You have to go into those dark corners, those dark parts of history, to figure out what our history is, the nature of reality, etc., etc. So it goes as far back as ancient times. I will throw out a few things people can look up. Like I said, you got the butterfly dream. Um, you got the ancient Greek philosophy of, and I'm sorry if I'm going to butcher this word, Anaxicus. I think I got that right.
Okay.
You can look into that, and that's where it compares reality to a painting or like a book, and it even goes into dreams, like dreams are
Right.
a simulation.
Hmm.
So once we get to more modern times, we get to the 17th century, and I have a name here if people want to look this one up. Let me just find it here for you. If not, I can come back to this a little bit later. Um, yes, you have Rene Descartes. I think
Hmm.
he's a French philosopher in the 17th century, and by then you've already had the Renaissance, and you're starting to talk about things are a little more complex, and things like that. And then you get to, like I said, in the 1980s, where you have the Jean Baudrillard and his simulacra and simulations book and things like that, which is very interesting read. Um, so we can talk a little bit, if you want, about the digital simulation,
Okay. Well, before we move to
which
the more modern
sure,
stuff and the digital
yep,
stuff,
hmm
so back in the day, they obviously did not have our technology, as you stated. They put it a lot to what they could conceptualize as being a simulation.
yes,
Primarily, that would be represented in that would be like stating you're a figment of a grander imagination or something along those lines back in those days, because they were heavily dream centric when it came to communication with divine and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But overall, the principles remained the same within the simulation hypothesis, correct? It's all a part of
This,
we're living
yeah,
within said simulation, even if it's a dream or a painting or someone's poetic works, and we're just not aware of it
I
on a
think
higher
those,
level.
yeah, in a way, I think those are very simplified. You're just kind of comparing it to
Hmm.
something that you have in your reality at that point. It's a comparison, but I think when it comes to the dream aspect and like a painting and that creative comparison, yes and no. I think it's far more advanced than that because even the
Right,
ancient Greek, they had a very the ancient Greeks, they had a great knowledge of mathematics, and they start to, you could say, modernize it a little bit in their texts, where they start discovering that so much of reality was based in mathematics, that
right,
it was so correct mathematically, which kind of almost by definition requires an intelligent creator.
right,
Because if we're just going off of the act of randomness and there is no creator, it's all just kind of a mistake, if you will.
right.
Uh,
Chaos.
just yeah, an act of an accident. Just that simple. It's just an accident of like the Big Bang Theory, which we can get into that later, which has pretty much been disproven at this point, which
Right,
was it was a theory. Yeah, it did have circumstantial evidence, but a lot of it was tailored to a lot of biased information.
right.
And that's not to, I don't want to, I want to just quickly say, I'm not here to sell books or sell you on anything. I'm not trying to change I don't want to take away your beliefs or anything like that. I'm just sharing my perspectives and just bringing forth evidence I've kind of researched and discovered throughout my 10, 15-year plus of looking into this. Um,
Hell yeah.
and when it comes to the language of mathematics. That is your very basic code, if you will, for uh, most things we've seen around our language, for example, that can be translated into like a
Right,
mathematical code. So we had that prior to the dawn of modern age computers.
right,
This was for hundreds of years. Again, there was the Dark Ages that really, there was a lot of information that was lost. It also stopped the progress of discovery as well.
right,
So when we get to modern ages, then we had computers and we started having a new tool to process that mathematical code.
right.
And
And a new
it just,
concept as well.
yes. Now, again, that was still very circumstantial. There wasn't much meat on the bones when it came to, you know, if you have to say a digital simulation, and I use that term solely because I have a lack of something. I think it needs a more slightly different word that we maybe don't have or that escapes me. Because a
Right,
digital simulation, people think it can only be processed through a computer. So that a digital
right,
simulation needs a computer to run. And if there is such a thing, I think it's far different than a computer. I think it might not even be technological in nature. It may be more spiritual. um, Even when you look at religion, when it comes to the creator, God, if you will, you can either sell yourself on the idea that he just willed it in through magic,
right.
or he used tools. And it just so happens when we started having the dawn of computer, that's when we discovered DNA, or
Genetic
the
code.
human,
Right.
yes, the genetic code. And there you go. It just so happens it translated perfectly into code.
Hmm.
Now, once you start, and code is basically the fabric, if you will, the basics of how reality works. Um, we can make comparisons to a video game, even though it's a gross oversimplification.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a good comparison. Again, we're doing what the ancient Greeks did back then. We
Right.
have a video game to compare it to. And you see the pretty graphics, someone who's not familiar with how a game is built, and all you see is the graphics. You have certain rules and laws in that video game engine. But what you're not seeing is behind all of it is a code that's running, and it
Right.
controls every part of that simulation, because that's what a video game is. It's a simulation of a form. Even the most arcade video games, they are a form of simulation.
Right.
Now, and this is where purely by accident, I wanted to add things to my video games. I wanted to make them sort of tailor them more to my own preferences. I was
Right.
like, I can maybe do a little bit better there. I could maybe improve this in some way. Now, um, to do that, you have to understand the game's code, and through that, we use the tool of the computer. And once you're able to process it, you're able to tweak the code or completely add new code, entire new strips of code, and you change that simulation.
Right.
And through modifications, you can change the gravity, you can change the way NPCs behave, you can do all of that. And that comparison right there is almost the perfect comparison to what we experience in reality. And if
Right.
you need an example on that, because it just so happens that's what's going on in the time that we are all living in, you're seeing GMOs, you're seeing mRNA injections, which are scientists, and I use that term, you
Lightly.
know, yeah. You have to always look at the source. There's a lot of people that are sold that they're doing it for benefit. In theory, it's cool to, well, we can modify ourselves. We can make ourselves better, things we don't like
Right.
about us. Or, grow a strawberry the size of a melon.
Right.
Um, Unfortunately, you kind of well, ask yourself, when you look at humanity as a whole and these people that are in control and power, these scientists, do you really want these people modifying your reality? Do
Right.
you trust them? Are they mature enough? I mean, even that you're talking about the form of messing with creation.
Right.
And I'm not necessarily saying that it can't work. You're playing God, if you will. And I don't want to get too, I'm not delving into religion here, but even the most mature, the most, you know, person with the most best intentions, it can backfire
Right.
badly, especially when you don't have a full understanding of the code that shapes reality. Now,
Right.
about 4 or 5 years ago, you had Neil deGrasse Tyson. You like Neil deGrasse Tyson, you have Bill Nye. I see them as more celebrities than
Oh
actual
yeah.
full-blown scientists. So I always say, take whatever they present with a huge pinch of salt. But he was allowed to guest host an event that was dealing with many different scientific theories, techniques, things like that, tools. And there was he he wasn't really sold on it. He's not someone that presents the simulation theory or
Right.
hypothesis or anything like that, but he was hosting an event that was talking about this and presenting evidence for it. And even in the fabric of space, and I do have names here in my notes that I'm going to let you talk soon,
Okay.
move some ideas around so that
Well,
I can find these
yeah.
names, and I have the videos you can look up to watch it yourself, um, where they presented the evidence of the code that runs throughout the fabric of space. And what is space? That is
Right.
what we all inhabit. That is our, for one of a better way of putting it, the fabric of our reality. That the
Mm-hmm.
term fabric is even a comparison to something else.
It is
Um,
indeed.
and when they're talking about, you could look up CERN and the really disturbing experiments they're running with messing with the fabric of space and time, and the consequences that can have with the Hadron Collider. Yeah, we're literally within an age now where they are beginning to play God on a very literal sense.
Yes.
The very, they're modifying our reality like it's a video game.
Right.
So, there are reasons why, with these GMOs, and they've been cases that have been won in courts of law,
Hmm.
especially here in the States. And, even that's a flawed system, but that's a story for another time. My point with that is some of the side effects of doing things like this are cancers, new diseases. Uh, yeah, the list kind of goes on. We're even now with these mRNA uh, injections, we're seeing diseases that haven't existed before. Now,
Right.
again,
And we're
that's
not
not going to
doctors,
happen.
YouTube. We're not
Nope,
doctors,
not
YouTube.
doctors, not. Yep, not medical professionals. Just going off of things we can openly see with our own eyes.
Yep.
And critical thought, critical thinking, critical thought process. But it's it's very complex stuff, and I do not have all of the answers. Again,
Right.
I'm not here to try and push a religion or a certain thought process on anyone. Me, I'm just, ever since a very young age, I've always been fascinated with how reality works and how, yeah, we can improve things for everyone,
Right.
myself included. It's just selfish. I'm not trying to say I'm a saint or anything like that, but I'm also, this is something I can't really explain. It's just hard coded into me, if you will. Um, I'm opposed to psychopathic forces that want to enslave
Yeah.
everyone. For one, again, for
I
want of a
feel
better way
that.
of putting it. But Cory, I've been
So
talking for a while now.
you're
Any
good,
any
bro.
questions or anything?
Not at the moment, but so I was doing some research to get
Sure.
ready for this show, and the current popularized form of the simulation theory
Mhm.
was made popular by a man named, and I have this written down because I suck with names, Nick
Yep.
Bostrom.
Yeah, I got him here
And
somewhere.
he
Yep.
he conceptualized this in the terms of a low fidelity simulation and a high fidelity simulation for our
Mhm.
functioning reality. And
Yes.
I like to look at it this way because the high and low fidelity hypotheses, to add on to
Mhm.
this, also account for they actually start to account for the people that we call NPCs, the
Yeah.
people that we refer to
Ooh.
as main characters and such like that. Because in the high fidelity side of things, this is where you see the richness of life. Like I would go as far as saying Snoop Dogg is a
You
high
are going
fidelity
down.
character.
You're
I
going
know.
down a tangent here, dude. That
I
is.
am. I
There's
am.
so much
And
to talk about in this one.
there is, and I'll try to keep this somewhat contained so we can still
Mhm.
cover some stuff. But
Yeah,
I would say
absolutely.
Snoop Dogg is a high fidelity character
Okay.
within our natural simulation because he gets to experience the entire richness of our simulation. Um,
Sure. Oh, sure. Yeah. Like in
the
that sense, yes.
Yeah, and
There's.
the clerk
Yep.
at the gas station would be a low fidelity individual because they are not a meaningful, impactful individual within the main simulation. I'm not saying they don't matter.
Mhm.
And if you work at a gas
No,
station,
no, of course not.
don't take that personally. I'm generalizing because that's what I like to do. But it
Examples, my
gives
man.
you an idea of how different uh the simulation can be for various people.
Mhm.
And
Oh yeah.
it also explains some of the feelings that people get about their lives. Like, oh, I'm meant for more, to continue with the terms, I'm not supposed to be an NPC, like blah, blah, blah. But
You were really touching upon something
I,
very important here, man. Keep going.
yeah, we'll get there. But I like the concepts of the high fidelity versus the low
Mhm.
fidelity because it encompasses quite a few things.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I did want to touch on something real quick, and this actually ties into the fidelity quality of the simulation that we're doing. And it's Casey Charlie Chats. He says how thoughts affect our physical worlds, such as the observer effect. This is
Yep.
another interesting effect that we
Oh
see.
yeah.
Even we saw this before Google came out with their psychic ads, where you think about something and then they're like,
Uh,
"Ha, there it is," which
we'll
I'm not
talk
okay
about
with,
perversions of,
right?
yeah. Mhm.
But it plays into that, how when you actually think about something, it can then actually directly affect your experiences and the
Yep.
rest of your thoughts and emotions and your actual physical existence.
Mhm.
This is one of those things where I'm like, if it's not a simulation, then how do the thoughts tie into physical manifestations without physical intervention? And we see that a
Uh,
lot. But
no, we do, and that concept, for lack of a better word, this might be my failing.
mhm,
The concept of that, has been perverted by a lot of, I'm just going to call it what is New Age religions,
right,
as well. So it's very easy to go after the big tech companies and the control system, but part of their whole thing as well is to spread it down to the lower levels. And they know that eventually people, when they're searching for truth, they're gonna eventually find it, no matter how long it takes. And to counter that, you have to, the biggest lie, the greatest, the most potent lies are ones that are wrapped in truth. So what you do is you take that truth, or you take that scientific sound theory, and you perverse the shit out of it. It's okay to swear, I
of
hope.
course. I
This
don't
is
fucking
I'm
care about
very
that.
I'm very passionate about this stuff, and I do take it to heart when I see these wonderful ideas and these wonderful concepts that really can benefit our reality, not just us, but you know everything we share it with, and they just perverse the shit out of it, and we're seeing that now. But I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, my man. And
No,
it's
you're
just
good.
this subject matter is so deep, and when you
Hmm.
get a certain thought process coming, like if you don't get it out there, sometimes it'll be taken over by other thought processes that are talking about, and you'll forget about it, and it's just got to get it out there. The information is important.
Right. So in modern world, um,
Hmm.
Ryan Roger Athe is simultaneously joking and not at the same time. He says the simulation is real, folks, as real as Israel. Some of the servers are breaking down, like the U.S. and Ukrainian servers. What do you think actually do we see evidence of the simulation collapsing? Do you think?
Oh, the destabilization of the simulation. Yes, and again, I'm gonna go back to history a little bit
Mhm.
here, and I do apologize. I don't usually speak this quickly. The reason I'm doing this is to try and get as much information out in a time frame that isn't 6, 7, 8 hours. Which you can even there are presentations about this information out there that you need 2 days to go through, and they still have only touched the surface of simulation theory and
Mhm.
or how reality actually functions. Now, in history, and I kind of wanted to take it away from the popular film franchise, The Matrix,
Right.
and actually, because again, I want people to understand the meat and potatoes and how that was inspired by all of that. But the ironic thing is here is there are things that are coming out now that just keep bringing it back to the Matrix. And I'll get to that, with the you call them Matrix designer babies, which is yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to touch upon that soon. But another thing the Matrix was inspired from was different versions of the Matrix that came before the current iteration of that simulation.
Right.
Now, in the story of the Matrix, one he meets the architect, which was the creator of the Matrix, but he's not the creator of reality, and
Right.
that's a whole. And a lot of people will think I'd be attacking God there. No, part of my it's I guess a hypothesis is that reality was hijacked in the distant past by something. I don't know what it is. Could be AI. Some people have hypothesized aliens. You got demons. We talked
Right.
about things like the jinn and things like that.
Hmm.
And that they come from another dimension, if you will, and have perverted, you know, this reality from what it once was. I'm getting to a point here, I promise. Now, a lot of ancient cultures, like ancient Indian cultures, a lot of ancient European cultures, the Native Americans, they state that we are on the sixth civilization or the sixth version of reality, and we're crossing over onto the seventh.
Okay.
Um, that's what the Matrix was inspired from. When I got such a kick out of that when I saw that scene. It went over most people's heads. It was the butt of a lot of jokes. Even Saturday Night Live did a spoof of it where
Yeah, Will Ferrell's
blah blah blah.
vis-a-vis.
Oh, yeah, I get,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Go
hated
ahead.
that.
So did I. And I'm not saying I'm smarter than anyone. Me, I understood it purely because I'm a student of history,
Hmm.
both self-taught and clashed with the school system on this stuff. When I was in school, pissed off a lot of teachers. I already knew about this stuff because I've studied a lot of religions, I've studied a lot of ancient cultures, and I quite like some of the Native American cultures. They're not perfect by any means, but they talked about how each version of that civilization became more and more dumbed down, more and
Hmm.
more. And I mean that not in the sense of intelligent, but spiritually, emotionally.
I
You
would
know,
agree
I
with that.
I yeah, and the first one was quite literally perfect. They were spiritually divine beings, if you will. They
Hmm.
were, and I'm trying to explain this as best I can. There are other people out there that you can look up that explain this far better than I can. They were intelligent. They were at one with creation. They had everything they needed, and then somewhere along the lines, something infiltrated. Um, you could just say our culture, that's fine, but literally our reality, and saw potential in lowering the energetic vibration, which is
Okay.
founded in science. It's like what you talk about with the high level simulation, the low level energetic
Hmm.
simulation. That's where it's tied to. Now, these beings, or if it's an AI, they thrive better in the lower aspect, and they literally cannot access the higher energetic fields, if you will, because
Right.
you need to be balanced in intelligence, emotion, and spirituality. Um, and they've been modifying the human civilization throughout each version. And a lot of it is classed as mythology. So take that for what you will, like Atlantis, Lemuria. There's been a lot of great modern discoveries that may or may not be strong, solid evidence for the existence of places like Atlantis and Lemuria. It was like the
Hmm.
early 1900s, I think it was, where they took the Ark of the Covenant, and it was, the name escapes me, and it was purely mythology. They thought it was a story from the Bible, and that was it. It was a work of fiction. And then they actually discovered this place out somewhere in the Middle East, that general area,
Right.
that part of the world. And I apologize for not having the name of that area. And this is exactly how it's described. This must be what that place. Oh yeah, here we go. And it's kind of the same kind of process is going through with Atlantis and Lemuria. We'll see. They may still just be works of fiction, but as a story, Atlantis has always fascinated me because at the end of that civilization, before it fell, and a lot of ancient Greek philosophers, and I can't remember his name, one in particular, he studied studied Atlantis, and he had contacts thousands of years ago, predates Christ and all of that, where there were still some survivors from Atlantis, and the knowledge was passed on. And he got to talk with a few of these individuals, and he documented it to great out that it would fill multiple books, like and then like shelves upon shelves of books of this information. A lot of it was lost again in the Knights Templar. The reason they purged a lot of this information was because they saw it as blasphemy towards the church.
Right. It was
Um,
contrary into their beliefs.
yeah, it's not contrary to a creator or God, which is the
Right.
ironic thing. It actually lends credence to it. It's their
Interpretation.
yes,
Yeah.
and as we know, they shove that down our throats, and it's to me, it's a form of control. You're
Right.
perversing the name of God or creator, you're destroying that information through that. Now, there's still some that survived, and I will get into some of the texts that did survive. A lot of monks managed to bury a lot of these texts in caves, and some of it was lost on ships that sank hundreds of years ago and that was rediscovered. And they talk about Atlantis, and I know mainstream science, and this is why I don't really like to use mainstream science as my foundation for anything anymore. They poo-poo the idea. They still say, no, 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 it's all fiction, bullshit. Just like how we saw in the early 1900s.
Right.
The civilization that inhabited Atlantis was great for a time. It was spiritual, it was intelligent, it was at one with nature. And then somewhere along the lines, something came in and perverted that civilization. And there's talks about creating artificial consciousnesses. Um, they didn't say AI, artificial intelligence. They use artificial consciousness.
Right.
And
which actually ties into something I want to talk about here in a little bit.
Absolutely.
So
just real quick. Yep.
Yeah,
I love talking about this stuff, so I'll let you chime in here in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And the society, right before it fell, became very narcissistic, very sociopathic, and very psychopathic. Now, again, could all just be a story, but where I kind of get kind of a kick out of it is it's very comparable to what we are going through as a civilization now. And each of these civilizations, each of these 5 to 6 civilizations had a great reset. Now, a lot of religions, and almost all of these religions, have the same story when it comes to the cataclysmic events. Some of them say it was natural, like a volcano going off. Again, we can prove this. There was a volcano that went off, I can't remember, like a few thousand years ago, that brought humanity down to a few thousand.
Yeah.
And I will get to a point here. There was the Great Floods. Again, we can prove this as well. There were floods all over the world. You got, even in Egypt, there's signs of mass flooding all over Europe, here in the States. You've got so many of these ancient cultures and civilizations. You look at the Mediterranean and they find so many underwater civilizations, like ancient ruins underwater, ancient Egyptian statues that are hundreds of feet under the ocean, pyramids that are under the ocean.
Like in Cuba.
I mean, all over the world, dude.
Yep.
Without, this isn't just isolated in one part of the world, because that, you could totally naysay the idea then, just say it was isolated to one part of the world, so there's nothing to it. Your evidence is flawed. No, they are finding these all over, off the coast of Mexico, off the coast of India, South Africa, here, even off the coast of the United States, in some places, Canada, like the UK as well. There's some fascinating ones off of Ireland, Scotland, southern UK. Just, what I try to do is encourage people to go and look and find that information themselves. So if I can at least plant those seeds, I'm a happy guy. Now, we are apparently crossing from the 6th over the 7th. A lot of people have interpreted that as what the Mayan calendar was. All that, again, it was perverted. It's 2012, the end of the world, blah 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 blah, and it's that truth was starting to come out, that something was going to happen, but it wasn't as what the mainstream fucking shoved down our throats to create hysteria and distractions and all that.
Right.
It was the same in with the millennium bug in the 2000 and the second coming of Christ.
Y2K.
Yeah, and it really, it just does discredit to the actual information,
right,
that is out there for us. So it's readily available. Whilst we still have the internet in its current iteration, and I don't think we're going to have it very long. I really think people should take the opportunity and go look this stuff up, because the more of this knowledge you have, the more, the better you will be as a person. And I don't mean that to belittle anyone. We're talking about the more, that's what I was trying to say, the more on a higher energetic field you will be. I know that sounds very new age, and I apologize. Then on that negative sort of NPC, not much going on upstairs, not much going on spiritually, not much going on emotionally. It's like you're one step away from becoming a robot at that point, a
Yeah.
machine. And we'll get to that too, because there,
Well,
you know,
that was actually something that I wanted to touch on next. Um,
sure,
to push ourselves slightly more into the dark aspect of the dark corner. Many people who subscribe to the simulation hypothesis are transhumanist.
yeah, like Elon Musk, he's a lot of
Yes.
people relate the hypothesis theory, the simulation theory, or the hypothesis to him now. And I always tell people be careful when it comes to these characters
Mm-hmm.
because they are. It may seem like he's doing a lot of good in the. How ironic is this in the virtual world right now when it
Yeah, I
comes to
don't
Twitter?
trust
But
that man a single fucking bit. But
nope. Go ahead.
so with a large majority of individuals that subscribe to this theory being transhumanist,
Mm.
um, it gave branch to a secondary line of thought. Um, it was actually before transhumanism was as big as it is now, but it's the theory or the thought that the consciousness and the body are actually portions of two different simulations. And that if you can strip the consciousness from the physical simulation, you can then put it into other physical representations of the
Yep.
simulation. Um, the idea that the consciousness exists outside of physical form is not anything new. That again ties back to ancient philosophy.
With the soul and all of that.
Yeah, real quick before we keep going, hail Small Time Republic and hail Mass Grave. Uh, now, back to what I was saying. If they develop separately, um, the idea that they develop separately means that according to these individuals, not according to my personal beliefs, I'm regurgitating at the moment, folks, but according to these people, that means that your consciousness is not bound by physical, well, physics, that your body is. We see this in evidenced in some ways in the ability for people to actually think outside the box and stuff. Turing tests prove that people can think outside of physical reality and standard logic. But a lot of people are using this, in my opinion, as a booster for modern societal issues, such as like gender issues and stuff. And we won't get into that because that's not actually tied to the simulation hypothesis. But it does
Ah,
illustrate
ah,
how the
ah.
it illustrates
A little bit,
how
a little bit.
it illustrates how the transhumanists view people. Okay, your body is literally just something to carry your consciousness, and they want to take the consciousness and make it whatever they want.
I think they've used the word container before. If
Yes,
I remember
they have.
correctly. So,
The original use of that concept that I came across was actually Marcus Aurelius.
yeah.
He
Oh,
personally said,
love
"You are
this one.
nothing more than a soul carrying corpse.
Mm,
Your body is nothing
mm,
more than a box, more or less."
mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so again, it's not a new thought, but
No.
it's again being bastardized very much so.
Yep.
So,
Hmm.
what are your thoughts on the independent simulation idea?
The independent simulation
Yeah, where your
idea.
consciousness is on a different simulation level than your physical body.
I'm just thinking this one is again. I'm very passionate about this one,
Mm-hmm.
but it's oh man, there is so much information we could go through on this one, and so many tangents we can go down. Well, I am. A lot of people will misinterpret me as being someone that doesn't believe in anything. Now, I have been someone, when it comes to investigation, we can't let our beliefs get in the way because reality doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
to correspond with our likes and dislikes. You know,
Right.
there's so much in reality that I don't want to be true that is true. You know, solely because I just don't like it. You know, but I can't let that get in the way. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is because when I use the word belief, I do not let that dictate the truth. My belief is that there is a soul, that there is an energetic, if you will. I do not have the answers to what the soul actually is. I only have a basic idea. I think it is something that inhabits every living thing, every conscious living thing. It requires consciousness to function. And again, we're going to go down a pretty dark tangent here soon. There have been scientific studies where they've used tools, machines, because we only see a small fraction of what goes on in reality, like the visible light spectrum, for example. There's so many different. There's infrared. There's heat. You know, we feel things like hot, cold, the wind. You know, we know it's there. We can't see it, but we know it's there. We feel it. So there's certain things there that we cannot see, but there are certain tools that we have now, thanks to technological process, where we can see some of these energetic fields. So it's no longer just, you know, throwing ideas out there. It's no longer just hypothesis without
It becomes
evidence.
slightly more testable.
Yes, you have, again, it's still circumstantial, but you have a little bit of evidence there to back it up. Now, they've done studies on what happens when someone dies. You know, there are people that volunteered. You know, you've got people that have died and have come, that were resuscitated later, you know, before brain degradation, before, you know, before. Yeah. And they've made some tools that displayed a certain visible light spectrum. I can't remember which one it was, where when it dies, something exits the body, an energetic blob, if you will, exits the body, and it's gone, like it leaves, it goes.
Which is actually measurable by the fact that when someone dies, they actually lose some weight. It's not a substantial amount. It's several ounces, but it's still, they lose weight through the simple act of dying.
Yeah.
Like their mass decreases somehow.
Yep. Because the soul, even though it's on and if there is such a thing as a soul, again, I'm not letting my beliefs say one way or the other. It's just to give the benefit of the doubt. It has to interact with what we deem as the physical world.
Right.
For a better way of putting it. And that means it's going to have an effect. It's going to have a physical effect in one way or another. Now, if this energy that leaves the human body upon death is the soul, might be something else. You know, it's funny because even in ancient times they say the window, you know, the eyes are the windows to the soul. And what is it what people say when someone dies? There's an emptiness in the eyes. There's just something there that's different. Now that could purely be a physical thing, but it's an interesting connection there, you know, that ties to the idea of a soul. Now, you know, even though this answers some questions, it brings up a whole wide array of more questions. Where does the soul
often
go?
happens. Yeah.
Yeah, and if we're again bringing it back to the digital hypothesis theory, you know, if it is indeed a sort of digital version, again, not as we see in video games, but something that's being processed by something that's similar to technology. You know, you see what I mean? There's so much to get. Kind of
there really is.
Just gets
well. On that note, since we're talking about processing, and it has to be processed in some real way, one of the big things that has come out of the technology age, and I'm not speaking to the validity of these videos or anything like that. That is up to you, the viewer, to decide how you believe this. But a lot of videos and stuff have come out about glitches in the Matrix.
That's right.
I have seen planes stuck in midair. I've seen birds stuck in mid-flight. Granted, all of this could be done with creative video editing, but you know,
There's a lot of
when
fakes and charlatans out there.
yeah, and I've seen some videos that I'm all like, damn, that's a really good digital edit.
Mm.
And then I look at the individual who posted it and supposedly created it and all this stuff, and I'm like, this person's dumb as a box of rocks. I don't
Mhm.
know if they could actually do that or not. So some of these are actually somewhat convincing.
Mm.
Um, what are your thoughts on the glitches in the simulation?
Thank you, man. That's exactly where I was going to go. We're a little bit in sync there. Thanks. That's exactly where I was going to go. And where I was going to go with that, tying into this all, is if we are in a digital simulation, what do we know about digital simulations? No matter how mathematically good it is, no matter how well it's coded, there's always going to be a glitch in an artificial construct, in an artificial system. It's almost an inevitability. There's
Right,
no such thing as perfect. You can have perfect in the sense of subjective, like this piece of pie is perfect, in that sense, but there's no such thing as mathematical perfection when it comes to an artificial construct. When it comes to glitches, I'm being a little distracted from chat here as well because
yeah. I'm talking
Casey
to Mass
Charles
Square right now.
chats.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to touch upon that one. The Force, can be interpreted as a total joke. But George Lucas actually got his inspiration of the Force from ancient religions and ancient history, and that there is I can't remember what the Buddhism was one of the big ones he took inspiration from. That there is, to quote Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Force is what binds the galaxy together. Now, if you expand this, what binds the universe together? We know there are forces out there like magnetic fields. Just grab a magnet and a piece of metal and just have at it. That is
Right.
a force. So yeah, absolutely. The force, you can totally call it the force if you want. And in those ancient civilizations, there was reports that humanity was more, I'm not going to say perfect, but more in line with its potential. It had the abilities for telepathy, telekinesis, from the reports again. Pinch of
Mm-hmm.
salt, pinch of salt. But through these dumbing downs, through genetic modifications, and this might actually tie into the problem with the missing link. And I do not subscribe to Darwinism or the Big Bang, or I think evolution might be a small piece to it, and it's completely misinterpreted, and that in
Right.
itself is dumbed down. But the missing link was the big problem. That suddenly, almost overnight, humanity completely changed. Now, a lot of the mainstream teachings is that it was a lot more like a Neanderthal and like cave people back then.
Right.
Yeah, after the cataclysm, but before then, they've even discovered now that Neanderthals were having complex relationships and complex thought. And they've discovered these other beings that they really tried to say that they were precursors to humanity, but they've ended up saying, nah, the genome is just too different, that they were separate species, kind of like what a monkey or an ape is to a human being.
Right.
Which, fascinates me. Now, when it comes, yeah, again, bringing it to glitches, I think some are legitimate. Again, because I know through video game development as well, and it's frustrating as all hell when you have to debug a game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and no matter how much you debug, there's always going to be little glitches in there that come through. And again, I know I'm making the comparison to another form of artificial construct, simulation, if you will. That no matter how great your code is, there's always going to be glitches that come through. That being said, there's a lot of fakes and charlatans out there. There are people looking for attention, and there's a lot of great. I could grab my top of the range computer and my video editing and video visual
Mm-hmm.
effects software and create UFO footage that looks almost real. Like you really have to look to
Yeah.
find that it's not real. That being said, there's a lot of fake Rolexes out there. It doesn't mean
Right.
there aren't real ones. We let the fakes and the charlatans, a lot like how we see in society, the negative ones have the loudest voice.
Right.
And it's similar here. We always let the fakes, affect our thought process. We see one fake, they all have to be fake. No, that's ignorance at best and stupidity at worst. And again, I'm not trying to offend anyone there, but we can't, this is why investigation,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's it's not easy. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes dedication. It takes discipline. You can't just. There are a lot of people that will just sit there and just because it doesn't make sense to their own bias,
Right.
won't even give it the time of day. And I will sit here and tell you, I've investigated things that I almost laughed at. I'm not going to name names here because I know a lot of people believe this stuff, and I'm not here to make fun of anyone. But there have been things out there that just that didn't make any a lick of sense, didn't have much evidence. And yes, through months, years of investigation, I was able to get to a point where I could comfortably say, okay, there's not much evidence there to back it up, and I'm kind of removing that. You know how investigators have like a board and they have sticky notes all over it, and they're trying, it's.
Yeah.
I have something similar to that, where it's in my mind, it's a visual representation of a table, and I put cards down, and these cards, represent could be real, could be false, and it ties
Yeah.
into the nature of our reality. And then, through investigation, I'll remove that card, I'll add a new card, or I'll just say to be determined.
Right.
And that's what it means to investigate. You can't just sit there and say something's fake just without
Right.
investigation. You can't say
Mm-hmm.
that's final. You can have an opinion on it, go for it. And that's a big problem in society these days is you have so many people arguing and bickering, saying, again,
Mm-hmm.
narcissism. It's very prevalent in society that they have to be right no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
No, there's
Yeah,
no
we
there's no
we
giving.
see them all over Twitter every day. They always have
Unfortunately.
to be right. Yep.
Yeah,
So
and slows progress down, unfortunately.
so I know we're coming up on the hour, folks, but we're going to run a little bit longer today. Was there anything else you wanted to touch base on?
Yep, just real quickly.
Mm-hmm.
This is okay. I'm talking about you're going to jump back and forth, and I want to touch upon something you said earlier with Nick
All right.
Bostrom.
Hold on
Um,
one sec. Hold on one
sure.
sec. Boosh says people arguing and bickering. I disagree. Well, you're wrong. Continue. Sorry.
Okay, thank you for proving my point. I'm fine with that. It's always nice to be proven right. No, I know it's a joke. Sure.
Yeah.
Um, but Nick Bostrom, he caught a lot of flack back in 2003
Mm-hmm.
because he'd been working for years on his Are You Living in a Computer Simulation presentation. And during that time, as he was working on it, the Matrix trilogy had come out by that point. And he was accused of just copying the Matrix, which is funny because the first Matrix movie was taken to court for ripping other people off that had
Right.
brought this thing out. I'm not sure if he was one of them, but I actually remember feeling a little bad for him because he had never seen The Matrix when he published his papers. And yeah, that's what I mean. It's really easy to jump the gun and just attack someone. It's very easy to attack someone without investigation.
Mm-hmm.
And I will always The Matrix. There's a reason why I have a channel called Escaping the Matrix, where I rely heavily on imagery from the Matrix, purely because it's one of the most. It's a great representation, and condensing it down into you could say one movie. The first Matrix movie is a great representation, but I
Right.
consider all three of them. There isn't a fourth one.
Mm-hmm.
I consider all three of them as a contained story, and it delves in all aspects. It had more time to cover things that the first one wasn't able to cover. And the one big thing I loved about the second one was, manipulation through predictability, and how, there are certain things that are hard coded within each and every one of us. And I can give examples. Cory, I know you personally, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty confident in saying and predicting that you will do anything for your loved ones.
Oh yeah.
You probably die for your loved ones. Now, an intelligence that is far beyond us is able to that can see our code. That knows our DNA, that you know that has seen our actions early on in life will be able to predict that and is
Right.
able to set the stage so that we will be forced into a situation where we'll be making certain choices that it has made sure we have to make. The reality we live in is a duality based reality: good, evil, hot, cold, um, choice versus choicelessness. And this one
Mm-hmm.
is I wrestled with this one for a few years because I'm very passionate about choice. But I also have to admit there are certain situations where choicelessness comes into it as well, where we're
Yeah.
forced into a situation where we have to make either a choice we don't like, or the choices that we want available to us are just not available.
Right.
That is a form of choicelessness. And an AI, an intelligent being, even for 8 billion people, twice that, would be able to for, create a simulation. Doesn't need to be digital. It could be in the very physical sense. And this is where I wanted to get in a simulation in the physical, in a physical sense, for want of a better
Right.
word. That if we take reality as being hard, real, there's no digital aspect to it. And the simulations are so prevalent in reality right now, that people that simulate love that aren't actually in love, people
Right.
simulate being happy that aren't actually happy, people that simulate being the other gender when they're actually not the other gender. I mean, we're
Yeah.
seeing it to go to extremes at this point. That, whether we like it or not, is simulation. You can say it's fake and
Right.
someone being fake, and it's
Well,
true.
and
It is artificial, but they are still simulating a specific way of being, whether it's
right.
positive or negative.
I I very much like to use the term delusional. Yeah.
Mm,
Uh,
absolutely, but
because
a delusion is a
impactful,
train of
broken.
thought.
This is true, but it's delusions also someone buying into their own personal and fictional simulation of
Exactly,
facts.
exactly,
So
exactly.
it
Yep.
I just like delusion as a concept, even if you put it into the simulation hypothesis. Delusional thought would be someone uh, obviously going against what the simulation is telling them is actually true.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. And this is where
so,
you start getting into the very definition of matrix, not the
right.
movies,
Hmm.
but what is a matrix. And this is where it gets kind of scary and disturbing, at least on my part. They can totally simulate something that's wrong, and delude themselves into that simulation. That if there is,
Right.
simulations within simulations is a very real thing. Um, but we're getting to a point now, and again, this is where it gets deep, is where we're seeing individuals out there that are modifying code, our own DNA, our own base
Right.
code. Um, and I've always said, look, you are biologically a male. I don't care if you want to simulate being female. Again, I'm not attacking people here. I'm making an example. I am still within the right, by very definition, to say you are a male, because that, whether simulation or in reality, is what's true. It's fact. Sorry, you could wear skirts, you could, change your hair, you can have plastic surgery, but
Right.
as long as your base code is still that of a male, you're still very much male. Now we are getting to a point. Never mind just modifying someone's code, that you could literally take a male and just, I still think there's, these individuals, this whatever is in control, whatever's ever playing with this act of creation, act of God, playing God, and
Hmm.
they've even come out and said now, we don't need God anymore. We can do it better. the
Right.
sheer the sheer
They
fucking
can,
hubris.
yeah, they can grow babies in tubes. I mean, literally
Getting to that,
artificial wombs. Yeah.
yep, getting to that. Before I get to that, I just want to say, oh, you think it's impossible to actually modify someone's genetic code to go from male to female? Well, that's quickly becoming a reality. That's how
Hmm.
disturbing it is at this point. Um, Now, it's going beyond that. Just recently, over the past month, I could be off of my time frame here. They've come out, and this is why I kind of face palmed a little bit, not for the reasons people might think, because I knew the show was coming up, and again, one of my motives here was to take it away from the movie franchise, The Matrix,
Right.
and it kind of, call it synchronicity. I would recommend people look up synchronicity as well, because that also ties into simulations and spirituality and things like that.
Right.
It's very interesting. It was kind of in sync. I can't. It wasn't coincidence for me. There's been way too many things over the past few years that I there are coincidences out there, but it just seems like something else is at play. This was one of those instances. Literal pod babies that look like they're being grown right out of the movie The Matrix. That's going to be a reality. And it's not just one of those fringe things. There's always, videos out there, within a few years who can have this and that, and it never comes to fruition. Oh
Right.
no, they have the technology now. They've gotten the funding and they're about to go full head into this where they could grow human babies. You no longer
Mhm.
need a male or a female for reproduction. They're able to artificially create sperm and able to artificially create ova.
Yep.
And I think I sat there for a couple of hours just processing this. And you are by very definition simulating reproduction at that point. And it
Hmm.
goes beyond. You can choose. Oh, you want it to have blonde hair? Sure. We know the code. We know the human code now. We can tweak anything you want. We can add to it even. Although there are certain things we won't add to it because we don't want you being better than us. They can, take things away, which is what really disturbs me. And one of
Right.
the things I've been pushing for a while now is if we are indeed crossing over to a seventh civilization, and again, talk about coincidences when you have these political figures, business figures talking about the Great Reset, and talking
Right.
about Human 2.0.
Yeah.
It's, we are literally on the precipice. We are crossing over into that seventh version, and they're selling it to you now that humanity is going to be better. You're going to be new and improved. It ties into
Right.
transhumanism as well. That's going to be a big thing. No, I don't see it that way. I see it as another degradation of the natural human being. It's
Yeah.
going to be more artificial. It's going to be easier to control. And one of the things they could take away, and you talk about, you could look up the ghost in the machine,
Hmm.
which is also an interesting uh, concept, prediction of the future, if you will. And talking about predictions, we could go down the tangent of prophecies and how many
Right.
prophecies have come true. But my point with that, with having a being there, and an artificial, whether artificial or not, just super intelligence and being able to predict people's actions and choices and being able to control the stage like a chessboard, is you can predict outcomes and you can actually create the outcome you want, even if you
Right.
have, like I said, 8 billion people. Now, with these Matrix designer babies, as you so
Right.
coined, Cory, you could take away that container's ability to make choice. Now, why
Hmm.
did I bring up Ghost in the Machine? You will literally have souls then that are trapped in a body where the soul is not able to carry out its abilities, its functions. And
Right.
who knows? Or you've seen machines that have malfunctioned,
Right.
where it doesn't have the right processor that it
Hmm.
needs to carry out its application. And when you were messing with the code, with the code of reality, with the foundation of every, yeah, you're gonna have quite literally the perfect slave on your hands there. That is just
Hmm.
gonna carry it out. It's the next level robot. You call it Human
Yeah.
2.0. I call it human crossing over into an artificial robot construction. That's what it
Yeah.
is. It's no
And
longer consciousness anymore.
yeah, and the Small Time Republic brings up A Brave New World by Aldous
Yeah. Oh
Huxley.
yeah. Oh yeah. Thank
It's
you.
a
Yeah.
perfect example
Mhm.
because in that world, everything is controlled. The genetics are controlled. Who gets to have kids is controlled. Your emotions are
Yes.
controlled by chemicals and stuff. And chemicals that you introduced into the brain, to put it
Vince.
within the context of the simulation hypothesis, change the basic operating code of your brain. It's been
Yeah.
shown, as Mad Mardigan pointed out not too long ago, that depression has been it's been shown that a chemical imbalance is not actually the primary cause of depression. So when you take those, it changes your body's operating code to require the additional code of the medication to produce normal functions. And this is something that they can program as time goes on more readily as we move towards the more designer baby styles, like what you would see in Ender's Game, where the original book, not that half-assed attempt at a movie they made, but the original
Right.
book pointed out how you could change the color of eyes, you could change their hair color, you could decide what height you wanted them to be, and all these other things. Granted, you have to have a permit, but again, it's one of those things where they go in and they actively modify the code of your individual self to fit their idea of what functionality is. Um, as a psychologist who believes in psychopharmacology for some things, I do believe that this is dangerous for us to keep rewriting mental codes like that. But that's a discussion for another time.
Absolutely, and you make some really good points there in chat. Just to interact with chat a little bit, I usually do it when I'm moderating Cory's show. I usually chime in. I don't have that option right now, but I'd like to touch upon a few things.
Okay.
Bush and Vince talk about, Neuralink. Just touch upon that right now. I mean, this is one of the key evidences that Elon Musk is not for the benefit of a free-thinking individual. He has gone from, and I know, Cory, we talked about this off air, from trials with monkeys and apes that killed, it's not gone well, and they are moving straight into human trials in 2023. Not 10 years down the line, not 15 years down the line, literally next year, which is a few days away at this point. Sticking chips in your brain, so and they'll sell it to you like, oh, you can access Google just by thinking it now, and blah
Right.
blah blah. Calculators in your brain. Again, they're selling you that you'll be so much more and so much better. And and when you start putting artificial things in your body like that, well, then you're open to being hacked. You're open to being controlled from the source. You basically become property, and this is actually tied into the written laws that countries have. You become someone's property then, because you have something inside of you that is copyrighted, that is branded, and through law they can take ownership over you. I would recommend people look into that, because that's a big one. And
Oh, I'm sorry. You
was it
didn't pay your subscription this month. You're not allowed to think.
not allowed to think? They could put you into a coma if they
Yep.
wanted. I know this might sound like alarmist, just like an alarmist ringing off, because in theory, yeah, people that have lost limbs, and you could get into that. With euthanasia, with what they're doing,
Ooh,
killing off
Canada.
the old. Well, they're phasing out human 1.0, and instead of having a huge cataclysm this time, it's advanced. Now we can just
Right.
kill them off quietly, and then we phase in the new human 2.0. And what does that mean? Well, and my point here, I'm getting. With that being said, um, with that happening, my point is the control system that is in place, that is in power now, is not of the positive, the high vibration, the high energetic. Because they want a negative, they want something they can control.
Right.
They do not, and they want it all for themselves. They want all the, they have all the benefits in this reality. They're enjoying. They can afford to be patient as well. Now, some people say, but that takes long. It takes, they're going to die off by then. Yeah, but another thing they're obsessed with is bloodlines.
Oh,
Why?
yeah.
Is it just delusional thought process? Is it just because we can talk about their beliefs a little bit? They believe that they are the chosen ones by the Creator. It's funny because ancient texts again. Even the Bible talks about the Nephilim. That were cast out of heaven, and they came down to earth and basically corrupted man. In this very sense, they believe that they are the chosen ones of the Creator, of God, whatever God that
Right.
is. It's not my beliefs, it's what they believe. And they believe they are, through divine right, they can rule over humanity no matter what,
Right.
whether through twisted means. And the reason they want to keep their bloodline pure, and I it's not pure by my fucking standards, that's for sure, is
Right.
because they have a very specific code running through their blood.
Right.
It really is twisted at the end of the day, but it's an intelligent enemy we're dealing with. But real quick, and I think this is why I lost my thought process a little bit here, was with Bush. He quoted Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park, and it was a great quote. What you call progress, I call the rape of the natural world. And it's true. This is why I love these stories. When they were actually teaching something positive through those stories. Using fiction to tell a truth, as opposed to using truth to tell fiction, which is another one of their belief systems is, and sure, it's tied into Satanism as well. And I'm going to have a guest, hopefully, on my show who's an author who talks about Satanism in the entertainment industry. Um, is that they want to invert everything.
Right.
Um, so inverting the positive into negative. Again,
Well, yeah,
why do that?
that's why they're trying to make us sympathetic with villains, as an
Yep,
example.
and
Yep.
destroying our heroes,
Hmm.
making the heroes and villains. And now, sure, there are some great stories there that sure, we live in a world of duality and there's good and evil, but there's some gray area as well. And I love those stories that you know brings these aspects to light. The Dark Knight's a good one. That's a really good one. Where you have this force of chaos that kind of almost exists outside of that to kind of
Right.
show these two forces that clash. It's a great thing, but this is not to be mistaken with what we're seeing now, where they're quite literally making the villains the heroes, as opposed to being a villain that has some truth on his side, which is a very
Right.
different thing. And they're taking our heroes that were, we see this in reality as well. Who are the ones that always get killed off and assassinated? Are the ones that tell us to love one another, live in peace
Hmm.
and harmony. They always. Oh, apparently, we're not ready for that, is what George Carlin said, and I could quote him all day. But we're seeing that now. We've seen all our heroes get killed off that were teaching that very teaching from Star Wars,
Hmm.
Luke Skywalker, teaching things like he would rather die than have his being corrupted. That's a wonderful thing to be, and a brave thing to do. And then we're having him all going to an island and wanting to kill himself, and then having the villains of that be the heroes, and it's just teaching all the negative aspects of human nature. That's
Yeah.
what's apparently in now. But hopefully in the show, we've at least opened the door for people to go and look into this
Right.
themselves. There's so much more information to it, and I'm
There
not the
really
best at explaining
is.
things.
Well,
And
and while we couldn't cover everything, I do want to take a second so we can step out of the dark corner and talk about something that I find both humorous to entertain the idea of and awesome if it could actually be applied. The idea of cheat codes in the simulation. Obviously, I haven't discovered the infinite money cheat yet, but do you think that there's ways to cheat the simulation? Like make it a little easier for
absolutely.
yourself?
Oh, absolutely. First, you need to understand the code of the simulation,
Right.
and then you need to understand what code corresponds to what. I mean, turning water into wine, walking on water, bringing yourself back from the dead. I mean, I'm joking around here, but
So
no,
you're
really, I'm
saying
being
Jesus
serious with that.
so you're saying Jesus was a hacker. Knew it.
Yes, actually, well, he at least knew the code of reality better
he had
than
he had
anyone else at the time.
admin permissions. Man.
Absolutely. No, no, yeah, it's a funny joke, but yeah, if you know the code, I mean, if we compare it again to video games, back in the day,
Hmm.
we'd run out and buy a PlayStation magazine or a PC gaming magazine, and the code's right there for us to
Yeah.
put in, and then you need the tool to apply that code into that reality. And again, we're seeing that happen now, but they're keeping all that shit for themselves.
Right.
If what we call cheat codes, again, it requires a maturity, it requires an understanding, it requires a certain level of consciousness to be able to use that properly. And I think, yes, whether it was in the distant past or now, I think we have the ability to use those codes. Now, there's always the question: should we be using those codes? You know,
Right.
well, it brings it up, but I think that's pretty much proven at this point. You know the code. You can, you. This is where I kind of come in with my modification video game development. Cheat codes weren't enough for me.
Right.
And I wanted to actually go into modifying it and creating my own codes and things like that. Now, there's an understanding there that I have when it comes to reality. It requires discipline. Oh man, there are certain codes you shouldn't put into your video game. There's some things you shouldn't put in there. It requires consciousness. And yes, absolutely, with genetic code, with the code of the fabric of space, all you have to do is have the right know-how, the right tools. You just input that code, take it one step forward. You can modify, you can add whole new paragraphs of code and completely change the game, if you will.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely, I totally think that. Sure, it's a fun little joke, and we joked about it, man. But
Hell yeah.
yeah, absolutely, we're seeing that in today's world.
Yep. So Boosh McFadden says, my cheat code would be all hot women are naked and don't realize it. But he had a Freudian slip and said chest
There you
code.
go.
So I'll still
Chest code,
accept
yep.
it. It's a chest code. It's the chest code,
Yep.
dress code. That's right.
Well,
I
there
think
you
that would
go,
be an
Boosh.
awesome code.
Should you use that code? Should you? I don't know. Some of these women, I don't want to ever see naked, my man. But
of
hot
course,
women,
yes,
yes, maybe.
hot women
But
specifically. And of course, Vince Womack says try up, up, down, down, left, right, A, B. Classic
R2L2.
cheat code that was introduced long time ago.
Dude. But yeah, no, I mean, it's we can joke about it. It's always fun to joke about dark stuff. But if we bring it into all seriousness, yeah, theoretically, if you're playing God, you through a projector, for example, and we're seeing weaponry being applied to military forces around the world now, where they're able to literally project some like sound into your head without any sound being emitted. People outside that frequency will not hear a damn thing, but in your head, you're hearing all these sounds, and yeah, I mean, they could project. The worst sound you could ever hear, and it could drive you insane.
Like the
Well,
fart tone from South Park. Yeah, the shit
right?
tone, poop, whatever
Yep.
it is. Anyway, sorry.
Shit your pants. Now, why do I bring that? Why, in theory, with a more advanced understanding of the code, you could have a projector that could project onto people where they'll be able to not see clothing anymore, and they'll just see a naked body. Yeah, absolutely. All you have to do is give it a little bit of thought and understanding, and yeah, I don't think we have that. I pray and hope we don't have that. That's a code that I don't want in my game. That again, we talk about maturity and discipline,
Right.
because this isn't a single player experience. This is a shared experience with other individuals, and I know you did a show on collectivism, Cory. Just really quickly, because this is something I try to say in my shows and get people to listen to is we as conscious individuals that are ability to make our own choices, if we can find that common ground and come together collectively and have that common ground, we can make reality a better place for us all.
Yes, we can.
With cheat codes not needed, by the way.
Right?
So yes, it's a shared experience, absolutely.
Indeed. So a couple comments that I start here. Boosh says mind control is mind control, regardless of tech or source. I agree with that. And unfortunately, regardless of whether the simulation is true or not, they have figured out the code to controlling human minds. They're working very hard to do that right now. So all I have to say is make sure you think for yourself, maintain your independence, and do not let other people take away your God-given choice.
Yeah,
the second one. Go
sure.
ahead. No, go ahead, bro.
I just wanted to touch upon that a little bit. There's so many different forms of mind control at this point, brainwashing, if you want to call it that, and it's nothing new. It's absolutely nothing new. It might be something that's a little more unique to our current civilization. That's, you know, how many thousands of years we've existed within it. But
Right.
now there's new advanced forms of mind control out there. So
Hmm.
sure, you don't need tech, absolutely not, but it helps.
It does
When
indeed.
you go ahead, Corey.
Oh, you're good. Well, another comment that I starred was from Vince Womack. He says, "Interesting talk. I'm one of those illiterate morons that heard of simulation hypothesis only from The Matrix and rolled my eyes for a couple of years whenever someone mentions it. And this is actually a very common thing. It's one of the reasons that I like bringing topics like this up on the channel is because there are people out there who aren't familiar with it. I myself am not highly educated on simulation. Like this is the most I've ever learned about the simulation hypothesis. Was leading up to this show and during this show, but that's why it's important to start to do your own research. And doing researches do not have to challenge your theological belief. You can believe in a god, but still try and figure out what's behind the simulation hypothesis. You could still believe that everything is random, that everything is chaos, and should irrational absolute time should still be open to learning about other viewpoints. I absolutely love having conversations like this because we have a chance to expand the conversation beyond what we would normally hear. That's why I love having people like Shaun on because he has a very different knowledge base than I do. Mine is primarily based around the thought processes of human beings and how they behave and how they. I'm a behavioral scientist. That's what I do. I do have some theological beliefs outside of physical reality, but it's important to remember that uh, one, your perception is not always equal to reality. How you perceive things does not mean that's how they are. We know this. And two, the importance of thinking for yourself and doing research, inspiring thought within yourself is a vital part of humanity that simulation or otherwise, you should not let anyone take away from you. Um, so, regardless of whether you subscribe to the simulation hypothesis or you're a believer in creation through divine acts within a single reality, or whether you believe that we exploded into existence and somehow that explosion caused perfect synchronicity of all things, uh, that's your God given right. Just please keep an open mind. Remember that everything needs to be questioned. Doesn't matter what's going on, doesn't matter who's telling you what. Question everything, do your research, and don't be a fucking
Absolutely.
sheep. Don't be a fucking sheep. Not a single person that has watched this show, that has participated in this chat, or been on this show so far is a fucking sheep. And I love every single person for it. And just stay awesome. We are going to go ahead and close down now that we're nearing the hour and a half mark. Um, thank you, everyone, for joining us. For everyone on the replay, thank you for making it this far. And make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you like this and share it out with your friends to help us grow. We're almost to 600. If we get there, it'll be fantastic. But anything you'd like to say in closing, Shaun?
Sure. Just to touch upon your final comment there. Absolutely question everything. Always be humble. It's how you question things as well. Um, and it's tying into free speech and all that. I will always fight and stand for perspectives, so long as they cause no harm. For ones that are even things that I do not agree with, um, that I even disagree with 100%. But this is what it means to be an individual. We're all different, and it's okay to be different. I think it's what we need to have a healthy, natural society. The problem is we have people that are getting really uptight about their differences.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about the natural differences now,
Right.
not the artificial ones that are being thrown out there. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. If you want to check out my channel, which I have on BitChute, Odyssey, a couple others, maybe Cory, you could drop the link in the description.
Yeah.
For Escaping the Matrix. I'm probably going to have Cory on there again. We did a show back in October, September.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be doing another one, which we'll be talking about anarchy and how that is also vastly misunderstood because of the way it's portrayed in mainstream media and entertainment. And stay safe. Be kind to one another. There's a lot going on in the world right now where, yeah, a lot of people are struggling with making ends meet. We're living in a system, a very oppressive system right now. So, like, subscribe if you haven't. Look forward to next week's show.
Hell yeah.
And take care.
Hell yeah. I'm trying to find the link. I apologize, people. I will add it to the description after we're done with the live stream.
I can send it to you again, dude.
Okay.
In private chats, no problem.
Appreciate it. So, ladies and gentlemen, next Monday, the first show of the new year, Nick Weiser will be joining us for It Didn't All Suck. It's our look back at 2022 movies and TV and which ones we didn't think were too bad. Make sure you join us for that. Thank you all for joining us today. Stay sexy, don't get murdered, and have a wonderful day.